Listeners be advised. The Soliloquy podcast discuss matters related to the human experience and many that are sexual in nature. Due to this, some conversations may surround triggering topics such as sexual violence, self harm, abuse, and much more. Please be advised, a list of crisis and psychological resources will be available in the show notes of this episode. With that said, let's get started with the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please as we go through the following safety instructions.
In the event that there is a loss of cabin pressure, oxygen mask will drop from the overhead. Place the mask over your nose and mouth. Breathe normally as oxygen is flowing even if the mask is not inflated. Be sure to adjust your own mask before helping others.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Soliloquy podcast, where we step out and speak about sexuality. This is your favorite host, Vernon T. Scott, also known as Sebastian Adams. Again, pay me my motherfucking money. And also known as Slaytor Jackson. Book link in the show notes. Look at all the links in the show notes, people. What you need is going to be there. I promise you. So today's episode, I have Sharita back. We will be talking about sexually transmitted infections, also known as STIs. And for those who are not up to date on the lingo yet, STDs. So Sharita, now that we have you back on the podcast, do you mind introducing yourself once more and tell everybody about what you do in the beautiful and wonderful world of marriage and family therapy?
So yes, hi, I'm Shrita. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I typically right now work with kids, but I have started to kind of open up my practice in working with couples as well as just like young adults. And the awesome thing about marriage and family therapists is just like being able, as a person of color, being able to be there and be there for people when the way that I needed it when I was younger. So when I was younger, I wished that there were opportunities for therapists. A lot of them were Caucasian. And there's nothing wrong with having a Caucasian therapist, but I did find myself having to kind of over-explain my own culture to them on top of the issues that I was dealing with and kind of the intersection of that. And so having a person of color, I think it's just so much better. It reduces that stigma around mental health. And I always say, have a therapist. Everyone needs a therapist, no matter what.
Yes. And just to connect on one thing that you mentioned about just having to explain yourself to a therapist of a different background. I know even with my first therapist, I did find myself having to do that very often. And having to over explain yourself or even go into that greater detail does kind of cut into the quality of your therapy session, because you only have like an hour or so, if that. It's more so like 45 minutes, and that's outside of any awkwardness that you might have at the beginning of the session. The time is ticking, and having to go into that detail takes away some of that time that you really need towards focusing on reflecting and healing, or even just bringing up whatever trauma that is impacting you at that moment. And even with having someone of the same race as you, you might even have that same issue. You do have to shop around when it comes to therapists, so that you're connecting with somebody that you can not necessarily see yourself in, but that you are open and able to be vulnerable with, without having to over explain, without having to take yourself out of the session just to bring them up to speed on everything that's happening. So definitely shop for your therapist. I will say the most important thing is that first meeting.
I 100% agree. So like for me, I'm a queer therapist. So a lot of people within the queer community, they'll see therapists, but then those therapists may have their own like religious views or their own ideas, even if they are a person of color, they may be more judgmental. So please, please, please like shop around, look for people, read their bios. So typically when you're looking for a therapist, there's the Psychology Today, and it'll give you a little snippet of their bio and who they are. When you're looking for therapists, read that. See if that's something that sounds like something you'd be interested in. So do your research with that.
Mm-hmm. And last episode, you did mention that you're in school now to get your certification in sex therapy. Before you get into yours, I do want to mention my reasoning behind wanting to do that, because one reason. Well, not necessarily reason, but I know that there are therapists who are uncomfortable with talking about sexuality, which can lead people, most definitely when it comes to their relationship with their partners, lacking in a sense, because your sexual expression impacts a lot. It can impact your levels of anxiety, depression, or whatever the case may be, or even if there's some kind of PTSD that's associated with how you express yourself. And because not necessarily that they're not trained in, but they're not comfortable with talking about that, you're not going to get that service with that particular therapist. So that is one. Since I'm very, very, very open and loving of having those sex conversations, that's part of the reason why I am pursuing marriage and family therapy, and then pursuing sex coaching and sex therapy, is to have more access to individuals who are willing to have those conversations with clients. Even if it is like in a consulting capacity, or even a partnership with their main therapist, just to help them out. But Sharita, why are you on your journey to be a sex therapist?
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking off of what you said. So, as a marriage and family therapist, as someone who works with couples kind of on a regular basis, 9 times out of 10, you can't have a conversation about couples and not talk about sex. Sex is very important in a relationship, even if they are asexual. The fact that they are asexual, talking about that, talking about intimacy, how do we figure out what forms of intimacy are going to be used, since you may not like this, actually having penetration sex, right? So that is super important. And that is something that I've found a lot of therapists not feeling comfortable talking about. Sex is such a taboo subject for a lot of people, and not feeling comfortable and not being fully educated on it, right? Making assumptions about what that looks like, making assumptions if someone is overly sexual, what that means about that person, and things of that nature. I also really got into it because I realized, as a whole, as a society, because sex is so taboo, I think actually, even though we're hypersexual, the like education around sex is not very thorough, right? So there's so much emphasis on having sex, going on Tinder, hooking up. Hookup culture is at large, but there's not enough conversation of, okay, if I swipe right on this person, I meet up with them, are we exchanging STI results? Or what to even look for on an STI result, right? So or even education on what STIs are, right? People talk about HIV and AIDS and chlamydia, gonorrhea, all of those things, but they don't even know what that looks like, what that means. Most of the time when people have an STI, it's asymptomatic, but they don't know that. They assume, well, I'm good because I don't see any bumps, or I'm fine because my partner said they were fine, and they got a call from the doctor and the doctor said you're good, but they didn't look at any of their results, right? So part of that pushed me into it. And then also with my own journey of like discovering that I was HSV positive and going through that process.
And how, because this is switching into the conversations about STI. How was that journey for you with grappling with your having HSV2, or is it HSV1?
I believe it's HSV1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how's that journey for you, or how has it been?
I was actually fully educated on like HSV. So HSV is herpes simplex virus. I was fully educated on it when I was younger. So I knew what it was. I knew that most people would get it. And I wasn't like scared of it to that same extent. Scared of the like, there was a tabooness of like in sex education of like what it's gonna look like on your body, right?
Mhm.
But as far as actually having it, like that wasn't like having a virus, it's not that big of a deal. We all have viruses at some point.
Mhm.
Um, so when I got diagnosed, it was kind of very exciting. As I said, I haven't said it. You can be asymptomatic, and so I was. And the people I was with, I would have those conversations with them. Do you have, going over STI results, but not necessarily, didn't do my due diligence in making sure that everyone showed me the results, but like we talked about it. And so what I didn't realize at the time that previously at my doctor's office, I hadn't got tested for it because typically it does not show up on the, like they do not test you for it. Most of the time, doctor's office will not test you for HSV because of how common it is and the
Mhm.
stigma around it. And so then I end up getting a test results where they actually did test for it. And I was like kind of shocked. I didn't know really how to take that. And then I kind of went down this like rabbit hole of like, what does that mean that I'm going to have like bumps on my mouth or bumps on my genitals? What does that mean? Because I did know that HSV1 can be oral or genital, and just like HSV2 can be oral or genital, but they always try to separate the two a lot of the times in sex education, but they're the same exact virus.
Mhm.
And so I was aware of that, but I was like, okay, like freaking out, didn't want to touch my body, didn't know what that meant. And then I went down this rabbit hole of just like, luckily with social media, there are so many people who are opening up and talking about their experiences. And so luckily I have found this one girl on YouTube. Who talked about her experience, and she was 17. And it was just like something about watching this girl who just around the same time that I'm finding and dealing with my journey, she was just dealing with her journey too. I just happened to run across it. And watching her kind of come to terms with that. And then like something about that, watching that. And then on Instagram, there was this group called Herpes Could Never. And there was a whole bunch of people who look like me, Black women, who were diagnosed and like their journey and what to look for, prodrome symptoms. I learned way more about HSV. Like I knew about it, but like I learned way, way, way more about it just from being involved in that. And then I went down this rabbit hole of like learning about the statistics, like transmission. What does that look like? How do I transmit this? What does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. And then it was like a kind of a shift. So at one point I was like, no one's gonna want me. Like to me, I know it wasn't a big deal. I know obviously people talk about they having cold sores all the time. That's the same exact thing.
Mhm.
But I know that one is more stigmatizing than the other. And for me, because I had HSV but didn't have symptoms, I couldn't say I had cold sores. So I think that's more stigmatizing than just say I have HSV, but I don't have anything versus cold sores for people kind of, there's like this disassociation of like, oh, cold sores is not really a
Mhm.
virus. So I went through that process of like, well, no one's gonna want me. But I would like, as soon as I meet someone, tell them like, hey, this is what I have. And like actually, except for one experience, most people were like, okay, like, what does that mean? And then like moving forward, which was like crazy to me because I was like, what?
Mhm.
In my head, I thought this was such a stigmatizing thing. And it is like you hear those jokes, there's always, you don't realize how impactful these jokes are into your like the like population that they're joking about. So you're like, I'll watch like TV and stuff and they'll make jokes and I'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. And then being someone who's like diagnosed, I'm like, oh, that's hurtful and that's just
Mhm.
ignorant and you don't understand, so it's just so weird. So yeah, and then I just kind of got to a point where it's like, oh, it's, I mean, I didn't have any symptoms. I continued to get tested, and then it was a learning experience for me because I knew that like in my study and research and what I've learned about it, by the time you're 50 something, you're going to pretty much be diagnosed with it, but you won't know because most people don't test for it, but you'll have it.
The Holiloquy podcast focuses on the variability of sexual expression. When it comes to sexual expression, we often depend on pornography to illustrate how one must perform sexually. For those who have not learned this by now, the stuff you see in porn is not real. Pornography provides a singular perspective of sexual expression that is not often the reality we see during our own sexual encounters. The Holiloquy podcast is a conversation that takes you outside of the compressed box of what many know about sex. Some of the topics we discuss includes kinks, condom usage, status disclosure, and past sexual experiences. The Holiloquy podcast steps out on sexual norms and recognizes that the norm is not the only normal. Subscribe today and join the conversation.
You won't know because most people don't test for it, but you'll have it because people aren't testing for it because it's super common. And you can be exposed to it 10 years ago and never have an outbreak, never show up or anything. And then when you're like 70, have your first outbreak and never know who gave it to you, never know any of that because you didn't even know you were exposed to it.
Right. And I know, like, even for myself, because I found out I have HSV1 last year. I don't know. These years are like all kinds of together now. But like even when I was talking to someone about it, it turned into an argument, and with me understanding how people it was an argument on their end, how people can react to that, and just being willing and being understanding of that reaction, just educating them like, hey, it's something that's not really tested for at all. I probably wouldn't even known about this if I would have gone to the same clinic that I went to last time. It's just this clinic that I went to this time, because I was out of the city that I originally was in, they tested for it and this came back. I get that you feel some type of way. I respect that, but also know that this is not me lying to you. This is me just learning something new about myself that I didn't know 24 hours ago, in terms of everything else on the panels or things like that I knew I was negative for. That information is still the same. On top of that, not ever having experienced a cold sore, not ever having any symptoms showing, is like, who would have known? Essentially. Like, even to this day, still not even had one cold sore. And even explaining to some of the individuals that I've communicated with after that, educating them on how common it is, which is a very, like you said, it's very interesting how that simple conversation of this is what's going on, this is how what it looks like across our country in terms of testing. It doesn't happen. I think the last statistic I saw was like 90%. It might be less than that, 75, somewhere within that range of people have it. And I'm like,
it's about 90% have HSV1 or HSV2, and I think HSV2 is around like 60 something, but people take HSV2 and think of it as just genital, and that's not. And people think of HSV1 as just being cold sores, but there's actually been an increase of HSV1 being genital because people with cold sores are not having those conversations about that they have it because they feel like they don't have to, and then I've heard situations of doctors telling them that they don't have to tell anyone, and then they'll go down on someone and then they'll have genital herpes even though it is HSV1.
Right. You know, I actually, because when I found out and I was talking to the nurse about that, she actually mentioned that. She was like, it's not anything serious. You don't really even have to tell anybody. I'm like, but for me and how I practice my sexual expression, I like to have that upfront conversation with people so that they know what they're getting into. Most definitely if it's somebody who enjoys like making out and kissing and stuff like that, I'm like, just know that is, even though I'm asymptomatic, that's still a risk for you. Is that something that you're comfortable with? And if you're not, I understand. It's not going to hurt me. It's not going to make me feel less than. Like, it is what it is. I get that I just don't fit the description that you're looking for, and it's fine. But it's so many people who will have to deal with the stigma so often because we are not educated properly on any STI. We're taught that sex is shameful. Having an STI is something to be ashamed of, and it's not. It's just something that's impacting your life like any other kind of infection or disease may impact you. If it's something that's treatable, like it's always been very annoying to me that people will willingly have intentional unprotected sex with somebody with the expectation that, oh, I can get rid of gonorrhea, I can get rid of chlamydia, I can get rid of syphilis, I can get rid of this, that, and the third. But when you bring in herpes or HPV or anything like that, it's just like, oh my God, we can't do that. But you're putting yourself at risk for these diseases already.
Yeah, and I think that, so my very first rejection that I had, actually, I think I only had one rejection, actually. It was some guy I had been talking to for a couple weeks, and then I like mentioned, like I had that conversation. And the thing is, before I had that conversation, I went over to his house. He wanted to be intimate. And I was like, I just wasn't into being intimate. It had nothing to do with my status. But when I got over to his house, there was an open box of pregnancy tests. And so in my head, I'm just like, so this is someone who engages at least once or twice, if there's multiple boxes of pregnancy tests, unprotected sex. And he probably would have been okay with if I had said, oh, let me have sex with you. We don't need a condom. Yet when I'm having this open conversation about STIs, it was like, oh no, like, I can't do anything with you. I can't have sex with you. I can't do that. And I'm like, you're at a higher risk of getting something from someone who doesn't know their status than someone who actually knows their status. I know what to look for. I know that what prodrome symptoms are. So prodrome symptoms are usually like if you're ever going to have an outbreak, that's that tingling that you may get in your lips or genital, if it is genital, or you may get an itch, or you may get things like that. Those are prodrome symptoms. I know how to deal with that if I ever got that. So, but you're having sex with people, they don't know their status, because most people aren't being tested for it. They may have an itch on their lip and they don't think anything else about it. They don't care.
Mm.
So,
like it's so ironic. I wanted to say funny. I laugh at it honestly, but it's so ironic that we are so, not we, but as a society, as a culture, we are so ready to raw dog it. And when you find out that this individual is at risk for something of transferring anything to you, now you want to be like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. It's like you had all intentions. Like, are you getting tested? Are you doing this stuff on a regular basis? Because you are raw dogging multiple people, you're not getting tested, and now someone who does get tested and let you know that, hey, this is a risk factor, is this something that you're comfortable with engaging in, now is an issue. Like the cognitive dissonance of it all just baffles me. Like, we can be reckless, we can do as much as we want, live free, and just fuck. But now that you have a guaranteed, or not even guaranteed, because it's not even like automatically you're going to catch this, but when you have, hey, here's the risk factors, here's the warning, here's what's going on, now you're putting on pause.
right. And you know what's funny too? Adding to that is like what I've noticed, because now I felt like I need to be more diligent, and just instead of just asking the questions, hey, have you been tested? And them saying yes and going with it, like actually going through and like, hey, let me see your results. And what I noticed is like people get offensive by that. And that's another thing. It's like, so I want to see your results because you said that you've been tested 3 months ago or whatever that looks like, and you're offended because you think I think you're dirty. Also, first of all, let's not use that language because no one's dirty because they have an STI. They did the same thing that you did. And maybe you have one, you don't even know because who knows, you may not have been tested for it.
Mm-hmm.
But like the idea that you're offended that I'm asking you for your results, but you should be asking me for my results. Like this is how things get spread because people are like, well, no one asked me for results. All of those situations where like guys are going around giving people like HIV or girls are going around giving people herpes and things like that. Did any of these people ask them for their results? Any of these, like, there's a part of it where it's like, yes, no, they shouldn't have handled it in the way that they did by not telling you. And yeah, that is deceitful. And you are the only person that's responsible for your own health.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the part that had to get me. I was like, man, I can't believe this happened to me. But I'm like, I'm the only one. I can't trust these people. People lie. This is not new. So I'm responsible for my own health. I'm responsible to see these things. And even having these conversations as I was going through my journey and talking to like close friends and being like, you need to start asking people for their results. You need to start, and they would get mad at me. They'd be like, Sharita, you don't know what you're talking about. You have to do that, but I don't need to do that because blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, do you want to be in the same situation that I'm in? Do you want to be in a worse situation than I'm in? Like, it was like people get so offensive when you want to do things and educate people, but you're also very quick to be like, let me just meet this guy and like have sex with them and I don't know anything about it. Because I know for sure for me, I never had raw sex. So if I got it and it is genital, it was with a condom.
And that's the thing that amazes me too, because like I do not participate outside of oral. That might be the only thing that I do that does not have a condom. But if it comes to any kind of penetrative sex that's not dealing with oral, then there has to be a condom worn, because I'm not comfortable with that. Because one, like it like you said, people don't ask about, have you been tested? And if you think that you're going to have sex with me without a condom, I'm going to want results of that day, because I understand the language of that paperwork. That the language of the paperwork is as of, which means as of this day, there's no kind of antibodies showing up in your system that indicates that you have this particular virus or disease or bacteria or whatever the case may be. So that means as of that day. That doesn't mean tomorrow it's not going to be there. That, like, HIV in itself takes 3 to 2 fucking years to show up. So you could have had some type of STI for some time and you just didn't know. Or you can have chlamydia, which barely has any that doesn't always show symptoms when the person catch it. So it's like you're
actually the number one symptom for all STIs is asymptomatic. Number one.
Right.
Everyone talks about, oh, well, there's nothing coming out of my penis, or I'm not the son. I'm like, okay, it doesn't mean anything.
Facts, like,
and you're right. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of like how you can test negative, and even if you haven't slept with anyone, and 3 months later it can show up positive because those antibodies did not show up. You might have been just exposed to it, and it just didn't show up in your body until later on. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, and they see that and be like, oh no, you just want people to believe that everyone has STIs and everyone has this. And I'm like, no, like that is a real thing. Like that's how antibodies work with any illness. It's like I've had conversations about like how like for just viruses, so like the herpes or HIV and things like that, and they're like, well, it's a virus and I'd never want to get a virus. And I'm like, you know that the common cold is a virus? Like just because it is, there's no cure to it. That is the point of a virus. You have plenty of parasites, viruses, diseases, things in your body right now. Like this is the same thing. These are all literally just the same as any other infection that you can get.
Have you ever had chicken pox? Like, and that's the thing that always gets me. It's like when it comes to the conversation about herpes, I'm like, I'm quite sure your parents literally took you over to some other child's house just so that you can catch herpes. because they wanted you to have the antibodies to fight chickenpox when you get older, or they wanted to expose you to that, so it's less, what was it, less harmful for children to have chickenpox than adults. So parents will literally have chickenpox parties so that all their kids can get it. That's herpes. That's the family of that virus. Is it herpes simplex? No, is it? I forgot. But
Yeah,
herpes
I forgot what
zoster.
it's called.
Herpes
Yeah.
zoster. And I'm like, that is what you're doing. That is essentially what you're doing. And it's like, but when it comes to sexual expression, now we have issues with viruses. Now we have issues with diseases. But we're like, the one thing that told me that I cannot fuck with a certain person, have sex with them within the last 3 years, is how they acted when it came to COVID, or even wearing a mask, because that tells me that, one, you're not out here wearing protection. You're not caring about properly protecting yourself. You're not even educating yourself on how this certain virus impacts you. So how do you expect me to trust my body with you when you're not even trying to get quality or actual information about something that's new, that's, yes, is ever changing, but the information's here for you to review. Like,
Right. And the nerve, like, I've had guys, so since my diagnosis or whatever, try to have sex with me raw. And I'd be like, no, I mean, I never had sex raw before. Why would I do it now? He's like, well, you have it. I'm okay with getting it. I don't care. And I'm like, but I don't know what you have. Like, either way, I'm not interested in having raw sex with you. He's like, well, it can't be any worse than what you have. And I'm just like, okay, we're not having sex ever. Like, like, it's just like, or like, what I've realized is, like, so there was this guy that I was like, he was poly, so we would like hook up occasionally, and like he was having not having unprotected sex, but he would try to have unprotected sex with me, or like at least have sex with me, and right afterwards have sex with other people. And so like in my head, it's like he knew my status, and so it's like, not only now you're putting other people at risk, right? This is how things like this spread. And I'm not saying you have to tell every single person that you had sex with someone who has herpes, if it was genital. I don't know, because I don't know if it's genital or not, right? But this is how it spreads. You had sex with me, knowing my status, knowing what's going on, and you're not telling any of these other girls. You could have been exposed by me making out with you. You could have got exposed to it. And now you're just making out with someone, right? Like the next day is like, and these girls don't know. I'm sure these girls are never not looking at your status, or even if they were looking at your results, they don't know that you were just exposed to it the day before. So,
child, I will say I love the fact that a lot more doctors' offices and physician offices, however you want to name it, are or even just clinics, are moving to online platforms for results, because I used to just have to make sure I take a picture of my results, so I can always have that on my phone just in case somebody asks. Like, I wait and live for somebody to ask me about my results. I don't mind sharing it. Let me show you. Look, this is my A credit score, like whatever the case it is. Look at it. Look at my ST. I'm proud of it. Whatever the case may be, whatever I do have in my body, I'm going to be proud of it because I've healed from it. I've learned I'm still a sexual being, but I'm proud to show you my results so that you can share your results with me, so we can at least have that level of vulnerability of, look, I have your information, you have mine, and we can talk about anything outside of that. Like, how do you, we're still having sex with the condom on, but still, what things are you comfortable with doing now that you have this information? Like, are you looking to do a little bit more? Like, there's only one person, I will say, well, other than like ex-partner, but that I am willing to have sex with without a condom, but even that same person knows that they have to do that the same day we're actually having intercourse, and those results need to be same day if we're trying to do this. Not a week from a week before we meet up, most definitely, because that person has a partner, and I'm just like, I don't want anything that's impacting me to impact your life with your partner or anything like that, because I even want your partner to understand what you're getting into also. That's the purpose of like being in an honest poly relationship is having those discussions with your partner. If you're not communicating, or if you're not willing to take that test, it's going to be a condom. It is what it is. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm still going to enjoy it. Look, I use the bear skins, just make sure it's even better. So, like, what's up?
Right. And I think a lot of people aren't even fully aware of like other ways you could do testing. So yeah, you can go to the clinic. There's free testing at the clinic. You can do online testing where you can send the test results out to the place and then they give you the results. You can go to your doctor. And then for HIV, there's OraQuick. You can buy that. It's $40. Literally $40. I can go buy OraQuick in 20 minutes. I'll know whether or not I at least have the antibodies in my body. And I think so many people aren't even aware of that because of like, I think by having that information, I'm like, okay, so I can see right now that you don't have HIV, right? And I don't have HIV. Cool. We still got to wait for the other stuff, but at least we know this part.
Right. And I think it would be very beneficial to have a lot more at-home testing for the other STIs. Like for syphilis, if it's possible, can we get that get a test for that, for gonorrhea? And some people don't understand that you can have gonorrhea on one part of your body than another part, because full disclosure, I've had gonorrhea before and it was from oral. So throat gonorrhea. But after taking my shot, taking my antibodies and all of that, it cleared up and I'm good and all of that good stuff. But that's one of those risks of having sex in that manner. But it's also good to know that you have to check your full body for particular antibodies. You have to check your throat. You have to check your vaginal canal, or even your vulva, or even your anus if you're participating in anal sex, just to make sure that you are not spreading any kind of any diseases to anybody. You have to do a full body workup to just know your actual results. If you're that's why it's important, one, to go to a clinic, but also to have that availability for those people who are not comfortable with going to a clinic, that they can do that at home. Have pamphlets or whatnot of how you can do your own anal swab, how you can do your own vaginal swab, so you can get your accurate results at home, regardless of your availability to go to a clinic.
Yeah, and they do have some for that. They don't have it for throat swabs, though, at least from my understanding. Because I've done one where you can go, let me look it up. I think it's called Norex. Double check. But I'll send you the link for it. But yeah, they do have that available. Where you can, so they only take insurance though, of course. Well, you can pay out of pocket, but it's really expensive. So if you have insurance, you can use insurance. But yeah, they'll send you the packet to you free of charge. And then, you have to pay for what test you want to do testing for. And then they'll have the blood test. So you could prick your finger and put it in there. And then they'll have like the swabs. So if you are female, they have like the vaginal swabs and you can put it in a test tube. And for guys who engage in anal sex, they have the anal swab as well. But they don't have one for the throat. But I do also, with that being said, though, I feel like doctors don't even talk about doing additional body swabs. I know every time I've gone, I've had to ask if they do like throat swabs for STIs or things of that nature. They usually just are taking your blood. So I think some of that comes from even like medical stigma about these things.
Like, just even with that just not saying that our health system is inadequate, well, it kind of is, but it's like, how are we as a people, as a society, expected to have safe sexual practices if we're not comfortable enough with educating people on that properly. Like this is one of the reasons why I am a fan of comprehensive sex ed, and I'm also a fan of just having conversations with parents as well as their students. Like they could be in the same room for a sex ed class, because parents need to know this information. Like, yes, you did the act, yes, you produce children, but are you at a point that you can communicate with your child about their sexuality, their sexual experiences, or even communicate with your partner about what's going on in y'all's sexual life? And that's another reason why I want to go into sex therapy, is to help parents parent a little bit better for their children whenever they do go through their phases, go through whatever it is that they may be interested in, or even just communicate their own sexual expression with their partner. Because even now, like the reason why there's so much, there's a prevalence of not necessarily child pornography, but child molestation, is because children do not understand or know consent, because they're not taught that, or they don't know the proper names of the places that people have touched them inappropriately. Because you cannot be in front of a court and say that, oh, my mom, my dad, my uncle, my grandpa, grandma, whoever, aunt, this stranger, they touch my papa, and they're just like, your grandpa? No, my papa. Or my gigi. Is that your grandmother? No, my gigi. Your private areas, they need to know those words. It is important for them to know that, and it's also important for parents, or even those who are not parents, just regular adults, to be able to address their body parts in the proper terminology, to know that, okay, I need to do a vulva swab, I need to do a swab of my penis, call the thing by its name. And we're in a culture that we're taught to be uncomfortable with those words. Like even listening to the podcast and hearing those words, there's possibly somebody who's like, oh my God, he said penis. Oh my God, he said vagina. Those are not ugly words.
Right. And I think every time, like I'm always like saying the real words. So when I like talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, using some sort of euphemism for their vagina. And I'm like, oh, so the vagina? And they're like, oh, why are you saying vagina? I was like, because that's what it is. And I'll use the real word, like your clitoris. Like I'll use actual words for what I'm looking at and what I'm saying, because yeah, like I feel like people are so caught up on like, oh, that's my pocketbook or that's my whatever. And I'm like, no, this is what it is. And I think there isn't a lot of education just in general about the human body. Like the fact that the vagina is self-cleaning for the most part. So there's always going to be some sort of discharge in underwear. And that's okay. That's normal. But you'll see these little memes and they'll be like, oh, look at her underwear. Someone will take a picture of someone's underwear and be like, oh, there's a discoloration there. And you're like, yeah, my body has normal discharge. It's normal. It's working. It's doing what it needs to do. Right?
Right. And that's even when it comes to like the lubricant that the body may produce, how some people are so into, oh, she has to be wet and all this other stuff, and not realize that you still need lube. Like I had a student back in the day who was trying to argue me down on why she should not use lube with her sexual partners. And this is an adult student, people. I work with college students, so it's all appropriate. I just have to put that out there because somebody's gonna be like, wait, what? But she was arguing me down like, oh no, I'm wet and I stay wet and I don't need no lube. And I'm like, girl, do you not know that you going with spit as lube, or even no lube at all, even if that person is still wearing condoms, that still puts you at risk for micro tears in your vagina? Like,
and I think that's the thing, is like, I think, there's so much stigma on like, oh, well, that's why, women have such high STI rates and gay males who have such high STI rates because, they just out here being promiscuous and this, that, and the third. And it's like, no, because y'all aren't doing proper education when it comes to sex, and y'all aren't doing what y'all are supposed to be doing to make sure things are safe. You don't know if you have a micro tear Like, you know, like if it's that tiny, you may not know until maybe even the next day, right? And you're putting yourself in these risks and thinking, well, you know, my vagina gets wet, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, cool. But also it's okay if it doesn't. Like let's like sit with that too. Like if you're a person who does not get as wet as other people, that is totally fine too. There's nothing wrong with your body. That just means that your body produces less discharge, and that's totally fine. Like there's no stigma around that either.
And like there's some people who really thinks that the anus produces its own lubricant, and it doesn't. It may produce mucus, but that's not lubricant. That does lubricate in some way, but it's not what you think it is. If you're going into someone's anal cavity without any kind of lubrication, that also has the risk of forming micro tears as well. That also has issues with possibly even having the anal cavity like prolapse. Like it's better to use lube than to try to use natural or bodily fluids to enhance the sexual experience. Like even when people are just like, oh, this person's like, I hate seeing this on like porn, when they're just like, oh, I got this person creaming and whatnot. I'm like, do you not realize that's just their mucus as well as your semen mixed together that's making that color, or even some leftover residue from when they douche their behind their anal cavity to clean themselves out for you, or even whatever is friction does what friction does. So it may look like it's some lubricant, but no, that is just mucus. That's the same mucus that comes out when you take a crap. That's the same mucus that's there naturally. So lube, people, it's your friend. It's your friend in all types of sexual experiences. Even if you like, even for oral, if you want to use a flavored lube, but it is your friend. It is your friend, people.
Even with self pleasure, right? If you're using
Yes.
toys, using it is fine. Because I mean, I know, I mean, I feel like everyone's been in a situation where it's like, okay, yeah, you're both of you guys are really, you know, moist and ready or whatever. And then that fan is on, and then the air conditioner is on. It just dries everything out. And you're like, so it's like, it's better to be in a situation. And then actually, I think there needs to be education on what can, like, you can buy lube, but there are some like natural lubes you can use that are safe for vaginas. There are some that are not. I've been in situations where this guy put lotion in my vagina and I said, what are you doing?
No.
What are you doing?
Oh my god.
And he was like, well, you know, I use that to like jack off. And I'm like, yes, your private part is external. Mine is internal. Okay. You don't put lotion inside of me.
There are essential oils in lotion that is not supposed to be inside the body.
There's so many other oils. Like you could use so many other things, but lotion?
Girl, I'm just
And
thinking
so
about micro tears in that essential oil getting in one. Oh my God, the pussy is burning. Oh my God.
right. And it's just like little things like that. It's like people aren't being educated on these things. People are not being taught on these things when we're in sex ed and legally, and I think it's like 17 states, you don't even have, it doesn't even have to be correct information that they're teaching you. And those states tend to be at the Bible, below the Bible Belt there. Texas and Georgia. They don't have to tell you those things. They don't have to tell you anything about gender identity, anything about gender expression, and they're so abstinent based. And so it's all about fear mongering to be like, well, you can't have sex because if you have sex, your penis will fall off. Like crazy stuff just to get people to not have sex, for them to, when they get adults and realize that they can have sex because their penis didn't fall off the first time they had sex, to be hypersexual and still not know anything about sex.
See, that brings up two things. First, is this is with sex education. Like I looked into my county's sex education curriculum, and I looked at the book, I looked at the service that they use. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's a comprehensive book and everything. And I'm like, yes. But I then decided, let me look at the actual curriculum and what they're teaching, what courses or what are they taking it out. And I'm like, so y'all are using the comprehensive textbook or comprehensive program just to focus on the abstinence only side of things, and then the fear mongering side when it comes to sexual diseases, and not going to anything else that's within that. It's a whole I think 24 module program, and they're only using 5 modules. And I'm like,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
very ridiculous. And the second thing that came up is, this was like a fucking Instagram discussion. I think they were arguing. I was laughing and making them sound dumb as hell. But they asked a question. This person asked a question because it was something dealing with that clip that was going around about the Black woman who's a sexpert, who was saying, you know, the language that we use is very violent, most definitely when it comes to women, like pounding the pussy. And then the women who was on that panel, they were like, but I want my pussy pounded. But like, that's still fine, but it's still a violent language. Like, it's nuance to the conversation. But it's under that, someone was like, what makes somebody a sexpert? And I was like, all right, do you really want to know? Because I don't want to be in that argument with anybody who's just want to be ignorant. And they were like, yes, tell me. I wouldn't ask if I didn't want to know. I was like, okay, I don't know if that was snarky. I don't want to project, whatever. Tell them, to be a sexpert, it requires you to have expertise that can be practical, clinical, wherever the case may be, as well as knowledge of the information as well. It takes time to be a sexpert. And they didn't like that answer. They wanted to push back and all this other stuff, like saying that I didn't tell them or anything. And I'm like, a lot of people don't understand that just because you are having sex on a regular basis and you're doing that with multiple people, that does not make you a sexpert. That doesn't make you an expert in the things that you're doing. That just means that you are having sex. That does not mean that you're knowledgeable enough to tell people what sexuality and sex is just because you're doing it. I can go out here and fix a hole in my wall. Does not mean that I'm Bob the motherfucking builder. I'm not. I fixed a hole. That's it.
Exactly. Because like even in my certification program, what people don't know, like as me trying to be a sex therapist, I had to be a therapist first. I had to be a licensed therapist first, which means I had to have my master's, which means I had to do 4 or 5 years in the field before I can even be in the program for sex therapy, right? And even for the sex education, I think you had to have at least like your bachelor's to even be in that program. Right. So it's like, it's not just like, oh, I could just, because like there was an article that came on not too long ago about how like there's this radio personality, I think, like what's his name? DJ Envy was with his wife. They've been together for 20 something years. And the wife, they have been having sex for 20 something years. They have kids and all of that stuff. And the wife told him like 10 years into their relationship that she never orgasmed. Now, you're a person who's having sex all of the time. You're a person, I'm sure y'all are having regular sex. Y'all have kids. And you could, in your head, think you're just killing it. Like, you're the best. You're doing whatever. And in the first 10 years of your marriage, she has never orgasmed. So what does that say about that? Like, that just means that you've had sex multiple times. It doesn't mean anything about you knowing what that means. And even if she had orgasm, that doesn't mean you are a master of sex. It just means that you really know how to pleasure that particular person, and what she has that pleasures her can be totally different than what the next person has that pleasures them.
And to loosely quote, because I know this is not going to be exactly what she said, but to loosely quote Shan Boodram, Shan Booty for those who follow her on that and don't know her full name. She said, the one thing that she can tell whenever it comes to her first sexual encounter with the man and how he eats her vagina, eats her pussy, is she can tell how his old girl used to like it. Because that's the person, whenever you're engaging in any kind of sexual act and that pleases a certain person, and you automatically think, oh, this is something that pleases everybody. And it doesn't. That just pleased that one person. Some people are into nipple play. Some people are not into nipple play. Some people like their clitoris licked or devoured, or however you want to put it. Some don't. Some do not like. Even when it comes to, if it is something pleasurable for them, if it's too much pleasure for them, they are turned off from that. So it's like you have to know a person. Like a lot of people think that there's an expectation, most definitely within what I've heard within heterosexual circles, where some women may think that just a male who is a guy who is involved with multiple sex partners or whatever the case may be automatically should know how to work a female's body. But you also have to understand, just because he has one map does not mean that map is for you. You still have to teach this man, this woman, or whoever the person is, what you like. You cannot expect them to read a body. That's a foreign language that they have to now learn.
I agree. And I really advocate for women, especially in heterosexual relationships, to say stuff. I think there's so much pressure on being like, well, I want to make sure this guy is happy and I want to satisfy him, that I know I've done in the past, where it's just like I've reduced myself and allowed him to just do whatever, even though it didn't do anything for me, just so he could finish or whatever. So you really have to find that confidence in yourself and just advocate for it. Because right now, if someone's going down on me and I don't like, I will stop you. I will literally be like, all right, at first I might move your hand and be like, okay, let me move it here. So this is what I want. But if they still continue and insisting on doing something that's just like, why are you here? I'm not going to waste your time or my time. I'm stopping you and we're going to figure out something else.
Yes. And this is a message for everybody. Do not be afraid to stop sex. Most definitely, I'm not using this in terms of like any kind of sexual violence or anything like that. I'm talking about a consensual engagement that you're having with a partner, be it a casual hookup or wherever the case may be. Do not be afraid to stop sex. You are a sexual being and your pleasure does matter. If you're not feeling comfortable enough to continue, then stop. If you're not feeling pleased, feel free to stop. Have a conversation of what is working for you, what's not working for you, because what's the purpose of wasting your time on an encounter that is not going to be pleasing for you? You're just going to be lacking, while the other person has this mindset, either they did what needed to be done or they've got theirs, so it doesn't matter. So do not be afraid to stop a sexual encounter.
I agree. Don't be afraid to stop sexual encounter. Don't be afraid to ask for intimacy if that's what you want. Like if you need to make out and kiss and all of that stuff to get hot and bothered, don't be afraid to ask for that. I know with hookups, sometimes it could be so like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But communicating about that, what you need. Don't be afraid to ask for aftercare. Like I think so many people, they engage in this like, quick one night stands or whatever. And then it makes you feel, if you don't have that aftercare, it can make you feel lonely. It can make you feel like that shame that comes, that we were taught about sex, that guilt that we were taught about sex kind of builds up, and it can make you feel like even kind of disgusted. Like, why did I just do this? Like, don't be afraid to have that conversation and be like, hey, look, if I'm having sex with you, I require aftercare. So if you're not willing to have sex with me and cuddle me afterwards or lay with me or any of that thing that I need to feel satisfied, then I'm not doing it.
Amen. Look, I'm a huge fan of aftercare. Sex with me does come with aftercare. But like it is very important that is something that you take hold of, that you do ask for. Like even just having a conversation of how you're doing after, that can be something that is useful for somebody. But if you're a person who doesn't like aftercare, doesn't require it, then continue doing what you want to do. But just know that is something that, for those who might want to do that, think about that. Make sure that's communicated with your sexual partners. Even if you're in a relationship with someone or married to them, if you haven't been receiving aftercare, tell your partner, let them know, hey, do you mind cuddling with me after we have sex tonight? Or do you mind just after we have sex, just having a conversation? Or can we watch a little bit of TV? Can we talk about our lives? Can we just do whatever. Do you mind rubbing my back a little bit afterwards, rubbing my leg? Sometimes I'm just so tired, my leg tenses up. Do you mind massaging that for me a little bit? Whatever the case may be, whatever aftercare looks like for you, feel free and be bold and ask for it. That way you're not constantly lacking within your relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's what I like so much about like the BDSM community, because it's like before you engage in anything, it's like these are my no-nos, these are the things that I enjoy, this is what I want afterwards, this is what I want out of this is the safe word. Like you have all of that stuff up front. So
Mhm.
then when you actually engage in that, you're like, okay, no, okay, I'm saying pineapples, no more, I'm stopping, whatever. But that's what I like so much about that community, having that conversation, being upfront. I feel like it's so ironic. Well, we talked about it. It's so ironic how hypersexual people are, but like just the lack of knowledge of what all sex encompasses, like,
Mhm.
and all of the intricacies that come with finding pleasure for both
It's
or
wild.
multiple. I'm assuming just one and two people, but I've talked about threesomes before, but finding pleasure for everyone that's in the situation.
Facts. Whew, I will say it's that time to transition. We're getting close to the close of the show. So, like I said last episode, we're only doing sex questions between me and you. So let's see what we have today. So, whom do you spill your sexy secrets to other than your lover? Do you have any hot secrets that you've been wanting to share?
So usually like a best friend. I had a really close best friend that I would share with last year. That person has changed now. Like, we just don't talk as much. So I do have a best friend now, but he's like my ex. So there's some stuff that I'm just like, I don't know. I don't go into too much detail about that.
Right.
And a secret that I have, I don't think I have any sex secrets. I'm pretty open, so I don't really have like. I'm down to try anything. I don't know.
I'm with you on that one. I don't think I have any like secret. I will say I do talk to my best friend from high school and also my line sister about a lot of my random sexcapades every now and again. I think those are the only two people I actually talk about sex with in that detail. If I would say, if I do have a hot secret, that there's a possibility that there's a porn out there with me in it. And I only say possibility because I never got the video on my end, and I did consent to have taken the video. I did not consent to releasing it, but I will also be okay if it was released, as long as I see what the video is, and if I'm pleased with what it looks like, then I will be okay with it being out there. If I'm not, then we got to take that down. But yeah, that's I guess a hot secret, but it's a potential or non-existent secret. So I don't know what happened to that video.
That reminds me. I guess I do have a hot secret. I had a one night stand with a YouTuber.
Ooh, yes, I support. I'm here for
That
it.
was fun.
Now I need to step my game up.
It wasn't a celebrity, but I mean, like, but it was cool.
Hey, I'm there's this one sex worker that actually there's more than one that I really want to hook up with, but one's in Texas. So whenever I do, this is the individual I was talking about earlier with I will potentially have sex with without a condom, but that person lives in Houston, but the sex worker that I'm referring to lives in Dallas. And I'm just like, look, if I'm there, I'm going to be reckless throughout the state, and I'm okay with dropping that 4 hours to have sex with the sex worker because I'm a huge fan. So the next question is, what do you first remember fantasizing about? I guess, is that sexual fantasy? Yeah, let's go with sexual fantasy.
Sexual fantasy. So that I can think of,
Mhm.
if we're talking about sex, there was this video by D'Angelo called "How Does It Feel," and he was shirtless, and I think he had like baby oil all over his body. And that was like the whole video was just him shirtless. And I want to say like that sparked a sexual feeling for me. But it like back like when I was having my first sexual fantasies, because I feel like sometimes I'm a little bit more on the asexual spectrum. Like it wasn't like about penetration. It was like all about like super making out and just like boob stuff. We're talking about like very first like sexual stuff, but like that's sexual. It's just not like penetration wise.
Mm-hmm. I think I don't remember my first sexual fantasy, but I do remember my first sex dream. My first sex dream included two people from my high school. This was ninth grade year because I have to say that because one of the people in that dream was not there at the high school when I was in 10th grade. The other person, it was a guy, and then the other one was a female. The other person, we graduated together. But yeah, it was a whole ass threesome that happened. And like ever since then, I was like, you know what? I might be into doing that. Had one, I enjoyed it, but like so, yeah. That was my first sex dream. My first sex dream was having a threesome.
Oh, okay. So I think my first sex dream was this girl in my high school. Her name was Jasmine. I say Jasmine is such a common name, so I can say her name. And she was a stud, and she had these pretty brown eyes, and I was just like, oh, I think I only like spoke to her once. That was enough.
Love it. I'm here for it. Well, with that being said, now I'm just thinking about other sex dreams. Good Lord, let's
right.
not go into that. Anyways, it is that time to be wrapping up the show. Do you have any lasting words, tips, or advice that you'd like to share to the audience? Well, share with the audience.
Yeah, I would just say own your sexuality and own your sexual health. So make sure, nothing's wrong with hooking up and doing all of those things, but making sure that you're having those open conversations about STDs, about sharing sexual results and talking about that and educating people. If you are positive on what that looks like, transmission, etc. And owning your sexual health. Your pleasure is important. Make sure that you are advocating for yourself. Like, don't end up in a sexual relationship where they're the only person that is getting pleasure. Like, you are important. And your body is important. So if you're not getting it, you can kick them out of the house then. Like,
and that's on that. Amen. That is a beautiful message, and I definitely agree. So on that note, everyone, please do not forget to subscribe to the podcast, follow, like, rate, and review. 5 stars only, 4 stars if you feel a little bit some type of way. We don't do no stars. We don't do 1 stars. We don't do 2 stars. 3 stars is a maybe. We just do 5 stars, because if you don't like it, keep on going. I stole that from my friend Nancy. But for real, let's do 5-star ratings, because you love to be here. But again, thank you all so much for being a part of the Soliloquy podcast, where we step out and speak about sexuality. Just in case no one else told you this today, you are beautiful. You are worthy of happiness and joy. You are enough and then some. You may not live up to the expectations of others, but that is okay. You are only required to walk in your own shoes. May each day you live lead you towards abundance. With that being said, love you all and see you next episode. Thank you for listening to the Soliloquy podcast, where we step out and speak on sexuality. You can subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcasting app and find us on the web at www.soliloquy.com. That's www.heauxliloquy.com. Share the podcast with your friends and join the conversation.